Hey there. This is going to be a quick video covering the 5 vocab words you've learned in Unit 1. We've learned a lot of new vocab this unit, so hopefully having these explanations of each word is a helpful reminder of what these words mean. In addition, if you want to practice these questions before you take the vocab quiz on Thursday, you've already had questions in your journal, and there are also questions in your study guide. So if you want to get some practice in before the quiz on Thursday, definitely recommend checking those out as well. That being said, let's go ahead and begin with the first 2 words. So the first 2 words we learned are acculturate and assimilate. And these words are connected, but they also have different meanings. Acculturate is the positive word. That's when I think you learn about and become part of a different culture. You are like the woman over here. She is not giving up any part of her old culture. She's part of a new culture. She's wearing the clothes, eating the food, learning about the traditions, but she is not changing who she is. On the other hand, when you assimilate, that is a negative thing, because that is when you do give up part of who you are because you are adapting to fit into a culture, especially a culture that holds a lot of power. We saw this image over here where people from different countries immigrate to America, they fall into the pot, and when they come out, they all dress, look, talk the same way. That is an example of people assimilating, adapting to fit in. And one more example of that is languages. If I learned how to speak Korean for fun, and I think I was doing it on my own time, I was trying to learn about the culture, I would be acculturating. And on the other hand, if I had to give up Korean to avoid judgment from other people, because people I think often judge you for speaking different languages, that would be an example of giving up my culture, assimilating to mainstream culture in America. Moving on, the third word we learned was called juxtaposition. We saw that in Frida Kahlo's work. We also see it over here in this photo. It is the act of placing 2 things close together, oftentimes to compare or contrast them. So over here in the top photo, you see, I think, 2 pictures of different neighborhoods. They are side by side. One is poor and the other is rich. And that is a way that we are asked to compare these 2 situations, these 2 neighborhoods. There are 2 more examples over here of juxtaposition, and I definitely invite you all to look at these examples and think about what 2 things are being put close together, what 2 things you see side by side, and how you would compare or contrast them. The fourth word we learned was stigma, and that is when I think society creates a mark of shame, disgrace, against a particular situation, equality, or a group of people. And this might be, I think, a common experience. There are a lot of different things that our society shames people for. One example of this would be people who struggle with mental illness. People are often shamed for having issues like depression, anxiety, or other mental health struggles. And so there are a lot of stigmas that exist in our society. Some of them, I think, are very prominent. Some of them are not talked about as much as they should be. But definitely, I think these are things that we can and should change. And lastly, there is the example of cultural norms. And the word norm, a couple of you might remember, I think, relates to the word normal. So we're talking about the idea of what is normal in any given culture. A cultural norm basically means expectations about how to behave or think when you are part of a cultural group. So in Korea, a cultural norm is to bow to greet your elders. This is expected of all people, and not following this cultural norm can lead to, I think, awkward moments or even punishment. This happened to me when I was in middle school. I moved to Korea from California, and so obviously I did not know that this cultural norm existed. And so when I waved at my teacher, who was much older than I was, my teacher responded by smacking me on the knees with a ruler. So just an example of a cultural norm that is pretty serious. And I still do follow the cultural norm personally, but I also don't mind if people who are younger don't follow it as well. So in short, I think a cultural norm is an expectation about how people behave or think when you are part of a cultural group. So at this point, we've gone over all 5 words. I'm going to give, I think, a little bit of advice to get ready for the quiz. Number 1, I think just keep in mind you have learned all of these words in class. So going over the practice and I think the definitions in your journal could be really helpful. There are also questions in your study guide, and the questions on the quiz tomorrow will be quite similar. So if you want to, I think, really get ready for that, that is the way to go. And lastly, vocab is used, I think, in language, and I think language is used as friends. So if you want to, I think, go over those words as a friend, maybe a classmate or a partner, that could be really helpful as well. You can also reach out to me for any questions. I'm always available by text or email, so just reach out for any help, and I'll see you tomorrow for the quiz.